I should have known something was wrong when Miranda started wearing perfume to bed. Not the cheap stuff either, the kind that costs more than my monthly car payment. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, back when I still believed in happily ever after and thought my biggest problem was deciding between Netflix shows. My name is Elliot Grady, and 3 years ago, I was a 41-year-old software architect living in what I thought was marital bliss in the Chicago suburbs. I had a beautiful wife, a decent house, and a job that paid well enough to keep us comfortable. I was also, as it turns out, the biggest fool in Cook County. Miranda Grady, my wife of 12 years, was everything I thought I wanted. Marketing VP at a major firm, gorgeous, charismatic, the kind of woman who could work a room like a politician during election season. She had this way of making everyone feel like they were the most important person in the world, at least until someone more useful came along. I should have paid more attention to that last part. Our house was one of those suburban dreams you see in magazines. White picket fence, manicured lawn, the works. Miranda had decorated it with the kind of expensive taste that made our friends jealous and our credit card company very happy. Everything was perfect on the surface, which should have been my first clue. In my experience, nothing that looks that perfect actually is. The cracks started showing about 6 months before everything fell apart. Miranda began working late more often, taking mysterious phone calls in the other room, and developing a sudden interest in weekend team-building exercises that apparently required overnight stays at luxury hotels. When I asked about these trips, she'd get that look. You know the one, like I just asked her to explain quantum physics to a goldfish. It's work stuff, Elliot, she'd say, waving her hand dismissively. You wouldn't understand the corporate dynamics involved. And like the trusting husband I was, I believed her. After all, who was I to question the inner workings of high-level marketing? I built software for a living. The most exciting thing in my day was debugging code and arguing with programmers about semicolons. The first real warning sign came from an unexpected source. Emma Russo, Miranda's best friend since college. Emma was everything Miranda wasn't. Genuine, down to earth, the kind of person who remembered your birthday without needing a Facebook reminder. She was also, though I didn't know it at the time, harboring feelings that would later change everything. It was a Tuesday evening in March when I overheard a conversation that should have opened my eyes. Miranda was in the kitchen, talking on the phone with Emma, and I was in the living room pretending to watch television while actually trying to figure out why my wife had been so distant lately. "Oh, Emma, you should see him," Miranda was saying, her voice taking on that breathless quality she used when talking about expensive shoes or spa treatments. "Oscar is he's everything Elliot isn't, you know? Confident, successful, decisive. When he walks into a room, people notice." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Oscar Fielding was Miranda's boss, a 44-year-old divorced executive with more money than sense and an ego the size of Lake Michigan. I'd met him at a few company functions, and he'd struck me as the kind of guy who wore expensive cologne to cover up the smell of his own bullshit. "I know I shouldn't be thinking this way," Miranda continued, "but sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if I'd made different choices, if I'd waited for someone like Oscar instead of settling for—" She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. I was the settling for. I was the safe choice, the reliable option, the human equivalent of sensible shoes. Emma's response was too quiet for me to hear, but whatever she said made Miranda laugh. That tinkling sound she used to make when we were dating, and I thought I was the funniest man alive. "You're right," Miranda said. "Life's too short to waste on mediocrity." I sat there in my own living room, feeling like an intruder in my own life. The television droned on about some cooking show, but all I could hear was the sound of my marriage cracking like ice on a warm day. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention. Miranda's work trips coincided with Oscar's social media posts from the same cities. She started buying lingerie that never made an appearance in our bedroom. Her phone became permanently attached to her hand, and she guarded it like state secrets. The breaking point came when I found a receipt in her purse while looking for gum. It was from an expensive boutique downtown, lingerie, size small. Miranda was a medium, had been for years. But I knew someone who was a small, Oscar's wife, Catherine, whom I'd met exactly twice and who seemed like a nice enough woman being married to a complete jackass. Except the receipt wasn't addressed to Catherine. It was addressed to Oscar himself, with a note, "For our weekend getaway. Can't wait to see you wear this. M.M." I stared at that receipt for a long time, sitting in my car in the parking lot of the grocery store where I'd gone to buy milk and bread, and had instead found evidence of my wife's affair. The paper felt heavier than it should have, like it was made of lead instead of processed trees. That night, Miranda announced she had another work trip coming up, a weekend conference in Milwaukee that was absolutely essential for her career development. She delivered this news while applying that expensive perfume, the same perfume she'd been wearing to bed for months. "That's nice," I said, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. "I hope you and Oscar have a productive time." She paused, mascara wand halfway to her eye. "What makes you think Oscar will be there?" "Lucky guess." Something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe, or just annoyance at being questioned. "He might be. It's a company event, Elliot. Of course my boss would be there." "Of course," I agreed. Silly me. But I wasn't feeling silly. I was feeling like a man who'd been sleepwalking through his own life and had just woken up to find himself standing on the edge of a cliff. The question was whether to step back or jump. As it turned out, I wouldn't have to make that choice. The decision was about to be made for me, courtesy of an anonymous tip that would arrive the next day and change everything, though I wouldn't learn until much later that the tip came from someone who cared about me more than I'd ever realized. Emma Russo was about to become the most important person in my life, though neither of us knew it yet. All I knew was that my perfect marriage was rotting from the inside out, and the smell was finally becoming impossible to ignore. The receipt was still in my wallet, a paper time bomb waiting to explode. But first, I had a wife to catch in the act, and a future to completely reimagine. The anonymous tip came in the form of a text message to my work phone on Thursday afternoon. I was deep in code, trying to debug a particularly stubborn program, when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Your wife's Milwaukee conference is at the Pfister Hotel. Room 1247, reservation under Fielding. Thought you should know. A friend." I stared at the screen until the words blurred together. A friend. Someone knew about Miranda's affair and cared enough to tell me. The question was who, and why now? I spent the rest of the day in a fog, mechanically going through the motions of work while my brain processed this information. By 5 o'clock, I'd made my decision. If Miranda was going to Milwaukee for a romantic weekend with her boss, then I was going to be there to witness it firsthand. Call it masochism, call it the need for closure, call it whatever you want. I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. Friday evening, I told Miranda I was going to spend the weekend with my buddy Darren, helping him renovate his bar. She barely looked up from her phone when I said it. "That's nice, honey. Have fun with your little project." Little project. Like my friendship was some kind of hobby I'd picked up to pass the time. But I just smiled and kissed her cheek, breathing in that expensive perfume one more time. "You too," I said. "I hope your conference is everything you're expecting." Saturday morning, I drove to Milwaukee. It's only about an hour and a half from Chicago, but it felt like crossing into another country. By the time I reached the Pfister Hotel, my hands were shaking and my mouth was dry as sandpaper. The Pfister is one of those old, grand hotels that screams luxury and discretion, the kind of place where wealthy people go to conduct business they don't want conducted in public. I parked across the street and settled in to wait, feeling like the world's most pathetic private investigator. I didn't have to wait long. At 2:30 p.m., a familiar silver BMW pulled up to the valet stand. Miranda stepped out, wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something red and clingy that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She looked beautiful, radiant even, in a way I hadn't seen in months. It was like watching a flower bloom, except the flower was blooming for someone else. Oscar emerged from the driver's side, and my stomach clenched. He was everything I wasn't. Tall, distinguished, wearing a suit that was obviously custom-tailored. He moved with the confidence of a man who'd never doubted his place in the world, never worried about being good enough, or smart enough, or successful enough. They walked into the hotel together, not touching but moving in perfect sync, like dancers who'd rehearsed their steps. Miranda threw her head back and laughed at something Oscar said, and the sound carried across the street like a knife to my chest. I sat in my car for another hour, building up the courage to go inside. The hotel lobby was all marble and crystal, the kind of place that made you feel underdressed even in your best clothes. I found a corner where I could watch the elevators without being obvious about it. At 4:15, they came back down. Miranda had changed into jeans and a sweater, her hair slightly mussed in a way that told me everything I needed to know about how they'd spent the last hour and a half. They were holding hands now, all pretense dropped. I followed them to the hotel bar, a dimly lit place with leather booths and the kind of atmosphere that encouraged intimate conversation. They chose a corner booth, and I positioned myself at the bar where I could hear them without being seen. That's when I started recording. I'd brought my phone with the voice memo app ready, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe I thought I'd need evidence for the divorce. Maybe I just wanted proof that this was really happening, that I wasn't losing my mind. I can't believe we have the whole weekend, Miranda was saying, her voice soft and dreamy. No interruptions, no having to pretend we're just colleagues. No having to pretend you're happily married, Oscar added, and they both laughed. The words hit me like a physical blow. Miranda had been pretending to be happily married. Our entire relationship had become an act for her, a performance she put on when she wasn't with the man she really wanted. I feel terrible about Elliot sometimes, Miranda continued, though her tone suggested she didn't feel terrible at all. He's such a good man, in his way, but he's so ordinary, so predictable. When I married him, I thought that's what I wanted. Stability, reliability. But now you want passion, Oscar finished. You want someone who can give you the life you deserve. Exactly. Someone who understands ambition, who wants more than just a comfortable suburban existence. Elliot's perfectly content with his little job and his little hobbies and his little dreams. He'll never be more than what he is right now. I gripped my phone so hard I was surprised it didn't crack. Little job, little hobbies, little dreams. This was how my wife of 12 years saw me, as a small man living a small life, unworthy of her grand aspirations. Have you thought about what you're going to do? Oscar asked. About your marriage? Miranda sighed, a sound full of theatrical regret. I know I need to end it. It's not fair to any of us, living this lie. But Elliot's going to be devastated. He thinks we're happy. You can't live your life for someone else's happiness, Oscar said, reaching across the table to take her hand. You deserve to be with someone who appreciates you, who can give you everything you want. Everything I want, Miranda repeated, like she was tasting the words. God, Oscar, when you say things like that. I couldn't listen anymore. I stumbled out of the bar and into the hotel lobby, my head spinning and my chest tight. The recording was still going, capturing the sound of my own ragged breathing as I tried to process what I'd just heard. Miranda wanted to leave me. Not only was she having an affair, she was planning to end our marriage for a man who saw her as a trophy and a conquest. And the worst part? She thought I was too stupid to see it coming. I drove home in a daze, the recording playing over and over in my head. By the time I reached our house, though I was beginning to realize it had never really been mine, I felt like a different person. The trusting, naive husband who'd left that morning was gone, replaced by someone harder and angrier and infinitely more dangerous. Miranda came home Sunday evening, full of stories about her conference and how productive it had been. She kissed my cheek and asked about my weekend with Darren, and I told her it had been fine, just fine. I'm glad you had a good time, she said, already scrolling through her phone. Oh, by the way, I've been thinking. We should probably talk about some things, about us, about our future. Our future, I repeated. That sounds serious. It is serious, Elliot. I think we've been drifting apart lately, don't you? Maybe we should consider taking a break, figuring out what we really want. A break. That was how she was going to frame it, like our marriage was a job she needed time off from, not a 12-year commitment she was ready to throw away for her boss's expensive cologne and empty promises. If that's what you want, I said quietly. She looked surprised, like she'd expected me to fight for her. It's not what I want, exactly. It's just, I think it might be what we need. I understand. And I did understand. I understood that my wife had already checked out of our marriage months ago. I understood that she saw me as an obstacle to her happiness, a burden she was ready to shed. I understood that she thought I was weak enough and stupid enough to just accept whatever scraps of explanation she threw my way. What Miranda didn't understand was that she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. She'd underestimated the man she was about to divorce, and that miscalculation was going to cost her everything she thought she wanted. But first, I had a phone call to make. The person who'd sent me that anonymous tip deserved to know that their message had been received, and I had a feeling I knew exactly who it was. Emma Russo answered on the second ring. Elliot, is everything okay? I think you know why I'm calling, I said. There was a long pause. You went to Milwaukee. I did. Thank you for the heads up. I'm sorry, she said, and her voice was thick with emotion. I'm so sorry you had to see that. I've been watching this happen for months, watching her lie to you, and I couldn't stand it anymore. How long have you known? Since it started. She tells me everything, Elliot. She thinks I'm her confidant, her supporter. She has no idea how I really feel about what she's doing to you. How she really felt. There was something in her voice, something that made me think this conversation was about more than just friendship and moral obligation. Emma, I said slowly, there's something else, isn't there? Something you're not telling me. Another pause, longer this time. This isn't the right time, Elliot. You're hurt and angry, and you need time to process what's happening with your marriage. Tell me anyway. I care about you, she said finally. I've cared about you for a long time, longer than I should have. I've watched Miranda take you for granted, watched her treat you like you're not good enough for her, and it's been killing me. Because you are good enough. You're better than good enough. You're kind and funny and brilliant, and she's an idiot for not seeing it. I sat down heavily on my couch, the phone pressed to my ear. Emma, I know it's complicated, she said quickly. I know the timing is terrible, but I couldn't keep watching her destroy you without saying something. You deserve so much better than what she's giving you. She wants a divorce, I told her. She's going to frame it as taking a break, but we both know what that means. I'm sorry. Don't be. You did me a favor. If you hadn't sent that text, I might have gone on believing her lies for months. Years, maybe. What are you going to do? I looked around my living room, at the expensive furniture Miranda had chosen, the artwork that reflected her taste and not mine, the life we'd built together that had apparently meant nothing to her. I'm going to give her exactly what she wants, I said. And then I'm going to make sure she regrets asking for it. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by a courier who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Miranda had moved fast, faster than I'd expected, though I suppose when you have your boss bankrolling your legal team, efficiency comes naturally. I was sitting in my new apartment, a modest one-bedroom place about as far from our suburban dream home as you could get without leaving the state entirely. The lease was month to month, the furniture was mostly secondhand, and the view was of a parking lot that had seen better decades. It was, in short, exactly the kind of place a man ends up when his wife's expensive lawyer eats his lunch money. Mr. Grady? The courier shifted nervously. I need you to sign for these. I signed his tablet and took the manila envelope, feeling its weight like a physical thing. 12 years of marriage, reduced to legal documents and property division. Miranda had been generous in her own way. She'd left me the older car, some of the furniture she didn't want, and about 30% of our savings. The house, of course, went to her. After all, she was the one with the high-powered career and the bright future ahead of her. What she didn't know was that I'd been planning for this moment ever since that weekend in Milwaukee. While she'd been busy falling in love with Oscar and plotting her escape from our mediocre marriage, I'd been quietly preparing for war. The first thing I'd done was move my money. Not all of it. I wasn't stupid enough to try hiding assets from a good divorce attorney. But I'd been careful about my spending, setting aside cash here and there, building a war chest that didn't show up on bank statements. The second thing I'd done was start documenting everything. Miranda's lies about her whereabouts, her spending on clothes and hotels, the gradual erosion of our relationship as she checked out emotionally. The third thing I'd done was start getting to know Emma Russo. It had started innocently enough. Coffee meetings where she'd apologize for being the messenger and I'd thank her for caring enough to tell me the truth. But somewhere between the second and third coffee, something had shifted. The woman I'd always seen as Miranda's friend became someone else entirely. Funny, intelligent, genuinely interested in what I had to say. She listened when I talked about my work, asked questions about my hobbies, made me feel like I was worth paying attention to. You know what I don't understand? Emma said during one of our meetings. We were sitting in a little cafe downtown, far from our usual neighborhood where someone might see us and report back to Miranda. How she can be so blind to what she's throwing away. Maybe she's not blind, I said, stirring sugar into my coffee. Maybe she just sees something different than you do. I see a man who remembers my birthday without being reminded, who asks about my day and actually listens to the answer, who makes me laugh even when I'm having the worst week of my life. She paused, looking down at her hands. Miranda sees someone she settled for. I see someone I'd be lucky to have. The words hung between us like a bridge neither of us was quite ready to cross. We were still in the careful dance of two people who were attracted to each other but weren't sure if acting on it was wise or ethical or even legal, given that I was still technically married. Emma, I started, but she shook her head. I know it's complicated. I'm not asking you for anything, Elliot. I just want you to know that you're not the problem here. You never were. That conversation happened 3 days before the divorce papers arrived. By the time I signed them and sent them back, I'd made a decision that would have surprised the old Elliot, the one who'd spent 12 years being understanding and accommodating and grateful for whatever scraps of affection his wife threw his way. The new Elliot was done being understanding. The new Elliot was going to play the game by different rules. I called Emma that evening. How do you feel about a little reconnaissance mission? I asked. That depends. What kind of reconnaissance? The kind where we figure out exactly what Oscar Fielding's weaknesses are. Miranda's too, for that matter. If they want to play games, I think we should learn the rules. There was a pause, and when Emma spoke again, her voice was different, sharper, more focused. What did you have in mind? You're still friends with Miranda, right? She still confides in you? Unfortunately, yes. She thinks I'm her biggest supporter. She has no idea I think she's making the biggest mistake of her life. Good. Keep it that way. And while you're listening to her pour her heart out about her wonderful new life, pay attention to what she says about Oscar, what he's afraid of, what matters to him, what would embarrass him if it became public. You want dirt? I want ammunition. There's a difference. And what are you going to do with this ammunition? I looked around my shabby apartment at the life I was building from scratch while my ex-wife lived in luxury with her new boyfriend. I'm going to make sure they both get exactly what they deserve. Emma was quiet for a long moment. This isn't just about getting even, is it? This is about justice. Is there a difference? Sometimes. What Miranda did to you was cruel and selfish and wrong. But if we're going to do this, if we're going to take them down, we need to be smart about it. We need to make sure we don't become the bad guys in the process. Agreed. No violence, no illegal activity, nothing that could come back to hurt us. We're going to beat them at their own game, using their own weapons against them. Public humiliation. Exactly. Miranda's whole identity is built around her image. The successful career woman, the sophisticated socialite, the woman who traded up for a better life. Oscar's the same way. He's all about status and reputation and being seen as a winner. So that's what we're going to take away from them. Their reputations. Their reputations, their social standing, their precious self-image. By the time we're done with them, they'll be the cautionary tale everyone whispers about at parties. Emma laughed, and there was something fierce in the sound. You know what? I'm in. Miranda's been treating people like disposable accessories for years, and it's time someone called her on it. What's our first move? Information gathering. You keep playing the supportive friend, and I'll start learning everything I can about Oscar's life outside the office. Everyone has secrets, Emma. Everyone has something they don't want the world to know about. And when we find those secrets, we use them. Carefully, strategically, but we use them. Miranda wants to trade me in for a better model? Fine. But she's going to discover that some upgrades come with hidden costs. We talked for another hour, laying out the basics of what would become our campaign against the happy couple. It felt good to have an ally, someone who understood what was at stake and was willing to help me fight for it. More than that, it felt good to have someone who believed in me, who saw potential where Miranda had seen mediocrity. By the time I hung up the phone, I was smiling for the first time in weeks. Miranda thought she'd won by getting rid of me, thought she'd cleared the path to her perfect life with Oscar. What she didn't realize was that she'd just made her biggest mistake. She'd underestimated the man she was leaving behind, and she'd lost the loyalty of her best friend in the process. Those two miscalculations were going to cost her everything she thought she'd gained. The war was about to begin, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I liked my chances. The first shot in our campaign came from an unexpected source, Oscar's vintage 1967 Mustang. Emma had learned about his obsession with the car during one of Miranda's gushing phone calls about her new boyfriend's sophisticated tastes. He's so passionate about everything, Miranda had told Emma, apparently unaware of the irony. He spent 3 hours last weekend just polishing that car. It's like his baby. That conversation gave me an idea that was petty, juvenile, and absolutely perfect. Oscar lived in a gated community about 20 minutes from my apartment, the kind of place where the homeowners association had rules about grass height and mailbox colors. His house was a monument to expensive taste, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows, designed to impress rather than welcome. The Mustang sat in the driveway like a piece of art, gleaming under the security lights. Getting past the gate was easier than I'd expected. I simply followed another car through, waving casually like I belonged there. A suburban security theater at its finest. The car was unlocked. Apparently Oscar's faith in his gated community was stronger than his common sense. I popped the hood and got to work, my hands shaking with adrenaline and barely suppressed laughter. A can of sardines, strategically placed near the engine block. Some creative finger painting under the hood where it wouldn't be immediately visible but would definitely be noticeable once the car heated up. I was just finishing my artistic masterpiece when I heard footsteps on the driveway. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" Oscar's voice, sharp with alarm and outrage. I slammed the hood shut and turned to face him, my heart hammering against my ribs. He was standing about 20 feet away, wearing pajama pants and a robe that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Just admiring your car," I said, amazed at how calm my voice sounded. "Beautiful machine. They don't make them like this anymore." "I know you," Oscar said, stepping closer. "You're Miranda's ex-husband. What are you doing here?" Like I said, admiring your car. But I should probably get going. Don't want to overstay my welcome. I started walking toward the street, forcing myself to move slowly, casually, like a man without a care in the world. Oscar followed, his voice rising with each step. You were doing something to my car. I saw you under the hood. Must have been a trick of the light, I called over my shoulder. Have a good evening, Oscar. Take care of that Mustang. I have a feeling it's going to be getting a lot of attention soon. I made it to my car and drove away, Oscar's shouts fading behind me. By the time I reached my apartment, I was laughing so hard I could barely breathe. It was a stupid, childish prank, but it felt like the first real blow I'd struck in this war. The payoff came 3 days later, courtesy of Emma's Facebook feed. Oscar had tried to drive the Mustang to work that morning, and by the time he reached his office parking garage, the smell was so overwhelming that building security had to be called. The car was towed, Oscar was humiliated in front of his colleagues, and someone had captured the whole thing on video. Stinky situation at downtown office building, read the local news headline. The video went viral within hours. Oscar standing helplessly beside his beloved car while it was loaded onto a tow truck, his face red with embarrassment and barely controlled rage. This is incredible, Emma said when she called me that evening. Miranda's been fielding calls all day from people who saw the video. She's mortified. Good. How's Oscar handling it? Not well, according to Miranda. He's convinced someone did it deliberately, but he can't prove anything. He's been ranting about getting security cameras and hiring a private investigator. Let him rant. By the time he figures out what happened, we'll be 3 moves ahead. Speaking of which, what's our next move? I'd been thinking about that. The car prank had been satisfying, but it was just the opening act. For the main event, I needed something bigger, something that would hit both Miranda and Oscar where they lived, their professional reputations. Miranda's been working on that big presentation for the Morrison account, right? The one that could make or break her promotion? Right. She's been obsessing over it for weeks. Why? Because I happen to know that presentation isn't entirely original. Miranda's always been good at borrowing ideas from other sources. Usually she's smart enough to cover her tracks, but this time she got sloppy. How do you know that? Because she used our home computer to work on it, and I still have access to our shared cloud storage. Old habits die hard, I guess. She's been pulling material from at least 3 different sources. Industry reports, competitor presentations, even some academic papers. She's repackaged it well, but the core ideas aren't hers. That could destroy her career. Only if the right people found out about it. Say, if someone anonymously sent the source materials to her CEO, along with a side-by-side comparison showing the similarities. Emma was quiet for a moment. That's not just embarrassing, Elliot. That could get her fired. Yes, it could. Is that a problem? No, she said finally. No, it's not a problem. She made her choice when she decided to cheat on you and throw away your marriage. If she's been cutting corners at work too, that's on her. Good. Can you get me a USB drive to her office computer? I need to access the final version of her presentation to make the comparison complete. I can do that. Miranda's been so focused on Oscar and her new life that she's gotten careless about a lot of things, including her friendship with me. She takes you for granted. She takes everyone for granted. It's one of her most charming qualities. The sarcasm in Emma's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. I found myself smiling, not just at her words, but at the realization that I was genuinely enjoying these conversations. Emma was smart, funny, and delightfully ruthless when the situation called for it. She was also, I was beginning to realize, everything Miranda wasn't. Loyal, genuine, interested in me as a person rather than as an accessory to her life. Emma, I said impulsively, after this is all over, after we've finished with Miranda and Oscar, would you like to have dinner? Somewhere nice, just the 2 of us. No reconnaissance or revenge planning required. Are you asking me on a date, Elliot Grady? I think I am. Then yes, I'd like that very much. But let's finish what we started first. I want to see this through to the end. Agreed. Miranda's presentation is scheduled for next Friday. That gives us a week to put together our evidence package and figure out the best way to deliver it. What about Oscar? Are we going to hit him too? Oh, we're definitely going to hit Oscar. But his turn comes later. I want to space these out, let them think each incident is isolated. By the time they realize they're under coordinated attack, it'll be too late to do anything about it. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I considered the question. 3 months ago, I'd been a faithful husband who trusted his wife and believed in the basic fairness of the universe. That man would have been horrified by what I was planning, but that man was gone, replaced by someone harder and more pragmatic, someone who understood that sometimes the only way to get justice was to take it yourself. Yes, I said, I'm enjoying this very much. Good. Miranda and Oscar destroyed your life without a second thought. They deserve everything that's coming to them. After we hung up, I spent the evening putting together the evidence package that would destroy Miranda's career. It was meticulous work, cross-referencing her presentation with the original sources, highlighting the borrowed passages, documenting the timeline of her plagiarism. By the time I finished, I had a 40-page report that would make it impossible for anyone to ignore what she'd done. I felt a brief moment of guilt as I saved the file. Miranda might be a cheating, manipulative narcissist, but she was also a woman whose life I was about to ruin. Then I remembered how she'd looked at Oscar in that hotel bar, how she'd laughed about my little job and little dreams, how she'd planned to discard me like an old piece of furniture she'd grown tired of. The guilt passed quickly. Miranda wanted to trade up for a better life? Fine. But she was about to learn that some upgrades come with a price tag she couldn't afford to pay. The war was escalating, and I was just getting started. Miranda's career imploded on a Tuesday morning in spectacular fashion. I wasn't there to see it happen, but Emma gave me a blow-by-blow account that was better than any reality TV show. The anonymous email had arrived in CEO Robert Chen's inbox at 6 a.m., complete with Miranda's presentation and the damning side-by-side comparison I'd prepared. By 9 a.m., Miranda was sitting in a conference room trying to explain why 60% of her original work had been lifted from other sources. By 11 a.m., she was cleaning out her desk while security watched. She called me crying, Emma told me over coffee that afternoon. She kept saying it wasn't fair, that everyone borrows ideas in marketing, that she was being singled out because someone had a grudge against her. Did she suspect you? Not for a second. She's so convinced that I'm her loyal best friend that it never occurred to her I might be the one feeding you information. She actually asked me to help her figure out who could have done this to her. What did you tell her? That it was probably someone at work who was jealous of her success. Maybe Oscar had enemies who were trying to hurt him through her. Emma smiled grimly. She ate it up. She's now convinced that Oscar's corporate rivals are targeting her to get to him. Speaking of Oscar, how's he handling his girlfriend's sudden unemployment? Not well. Miranda's been calling him constantly, expecting him to fix this somehow, maybe get her a job at his company. But Oscar's been dodging her calls. Apparently dating the marketing VP is one thing, but dating a disgraced ex-marketing VP who got fired for plagiarism is something else entirely. I felt a dark satisfaction at that news. Oscar had been happy to pursue Miranda when she was successful and useful to him, but now that she was a liability, his true colors were showing. Miranda was about to learn what it felt like to be discarded by someone she thought cared about her. That's perfect, I said. Let them turn on each other. It'll make the next phase that much easier. What is the next phase? I'd been thinking about that. Miranda's professional humiliation had been satisfying, but it wasn't enough. I wanted both of them to feel the full weight of what they'd done, to understand that actions have consequences and betrayal comes with a price. A party, I said. A very special party where Miranda and Oscar get to be the guests of honor. What kind of party? The kind where all their dirty laundry gets aired in front of everyone they know. I'm thinking we invite their friends, colleagues, family members, everyone who matters to them, and then we give them a presentation they'll never forget. Emma's eyes lit up. A public confrontation. Exactly. But we need to be smart about it. It can't look like we orchestrated it. It has to seem natural, spontaneous, like the truth just happened to come out at an unfortunate moment. How do we do that? We throw a reconciliation party, invite everyone Miranda and Oscar know, tell them we're all getting together to support Miranda through her difficult time and celebrate her new relationship with Oscar. Make it seem like we're being mature and civilized about the whole divorce. That's actually brilliant. Miranda's ego won't let her turn down a chance to show off her new boyfriend, especially if she thinks you're endorsing the relationship. Exactly. And Oscar won't want to look like a coward by refusing to attend. His pride will force him to show up. And then? And then we give them exactly what they deserve, in front of everyone who matters to them. We spent the next 2 weeks planning what would become known in our social circle as the Party from Hell. Emma handled the guest list, using her connections to Miranda's world to invite everyone from work colleagues to college friends to family members. I handled the logistics, venue, catering, entertainment, making sure everything looked legitimate and well-intentioned. The invitation was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive manipulation. Please join us for an evening of friendship and new beginnings as we celebrate Miranda's exciting life changes and welcome Oscar to our extended family. Let's show Miranda and Oscar how much we care about their happiness. Miranda called Emma the day after the invitations went out, practically purring with satisfaction. "This is so sweet of you to organize," she said. and how mature of Elliot to be supportive of my relationship with Oscar. I always knew he was a good man, even if we weren't right for each other. He just wants you to be happy, Emma replied, managing to keep the sarcasm out of her voice. We all do. Oscar was harder to convince. According to Emma, he'd initially refused to attend, claiming it would be awkward and inappropriate. But Miranda had worn him down, insisting that his absence would make him look weak and petty. In the end, his ego won out over his common sense. The party was held at a rented event space in downtown Chicago, an elegant room with floor-to-ceiling windows and excellent acoustics. Perfect for what I had planned. I arrived early to set up the audio-visual equipment, telling the staff it was for a slideshow tribute to Miranda and Oscar's relationship. What I didn't mention was that the slideshow would include some very special bonus features. The guests began arriving at 7. Miranda and Oscar made their entrance at 7:30, fashionably late and clearly expecting to be the center of attention. Miranda was wearing a stunning black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, while Oscar sported a tuxedo that screamed expensive taste and disposable income. They worked the room like the power couple they imagined themselves to be, accepting congratulations and basking in the attention. Miranda kept glancing at me, clearly surprised by how gracious I was being about the whole situation. Elliot, she said when she finally made her way over to me, this is so wonderful of you. I know this can't be easy, but you're handling it with such class. I just want you to be happy, Miranda. You deserve to get exactly what you've earned. She beamed at me, completely missing the double meaning in my words. You're a good man. I hope someday you'll find someone who appreciates you the way you deserve. Actually, I said, glancing across the room at Emma, who was watching us with barely concealed amusement, I think I already have. Miranda followed my gaze and frowned slightly. Emma? But she's my best friend. Was your best friend, I corrected gently. Things change, Miranda. People move on. You should understand that better than anyone. Before she could respond, I tapped my champagne glass with a fork, calling for everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. I'd like to say a few words about our guests of honor. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me. Miranda and Oscar stood near the front, both looking slightly uncomfortable but unable to leave without causing a scene. 3 years ago, I began, Miranda and I got divorced. It was a difficult time for both of us, full of hurt feelings and broken promises. But tonight, I want to talk about truth, about honesty, about the importance of seeing people for who they really are. I clicked a remote, and the large screen behind me lit up with a photo of Miranda and Oscar at the hotel in Milwaukee. The crowd murmured in surprise. It was clearly an intimate moment, captured without their knowledge. Miranda, you told me you wanted a divorce because we'd grown apart. You said you needed space to figure out what you really wanted. What you didn't tell me was that you'd already figured it out. You'd figured it out months before our divorce, in hotel rooms and restaurants and anywhere else you thought no one was watching. Miranda's face went white. Elliot, what are you doing? I'm telling the truth, Miranda, something you never quite managed to do. I clicked the remote again, and the audio from the hotel bar began playing through the room's sound system. Miranda's voice filled the space, clear and damning. I feel terrible about Elliot sometimes, but he's such a good man in his way. But he's so ordinary, so predictable. The room was silent now, everyone staring at Miranda as her own words condemned her. Oscar looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Ordinary, I repeated, my voice carrying clearly through the room. Predictable. A man with little jobs and little hobbies and little dreams. That's how you described your husband of 12 years to your lover, Miranda, in case anyone was wondering why our marriage really ended. Stop this, Miranda whispered, but her voice was lost in the shocked murmur of the crowd. But wait, I said cheerfully. There's more. Oscar, would you like to tell everyone about your wife, Catherine? About how she found out about your affair when the credit card bills started showing hotel charges for dates you weren't with her? Oscar stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. That's enough. You've made your point. Have I? Because I don't think I have. You see, everyone here thinks they're celebrating a love story. The successful marketing executive and the wealthy businessman, finding happiness together after Miranda's sad little marriage to her ordinary husband, fell apart. But that's not what this is it? I clicked the remote one more time, and a new photo appeared on the screen, Oscar with another woman, clearly taken recently, clearly intimate. This is Jessica Walsh, Oscar's new assistant. This photo was taken last week at the Ritz-Carlton. Miranda, meet your replacement. Oscar, meet your pattern. The room erupted. Miranda spun to face Oscar, her face a mask of fury and betrayal. You bastard! You cheating, lying bastard! Miranda, I can explain. Oscar started, but she was already moving, her hand connecting with his cheek in a slap that echoed through the room. Explain? Explain how you've been cheating on me the same way you cheated on your wife? The same way you cheated with me? This is different. No, it's not. It's exactly the same. You're a serial cheater, and I was too stupid to see it. The crowd was watching in fascination as the golden couple destroyed each other in front of everyone they knew. I stepped back, content to let them finish what I'd started. Ladies and gentlemen, I said into the microphone, I give you Miranda and Oscar, a perfect match. Two people who deserve exactly what they're getting. Miranda turned on me then, her face twisted with rage. You planned this. You orchestrated this whole thing. I planned a party to celebrate your new relationship, I said innocently. I just thought your friends and family should know what they were celebrating. You're pathetic, she spat. A pathetic little man who can't handle being replaced by someone better. Maybe, I agreed, but I'm not the one who just got publicly humiliated in front of everyone I know. I'm not the one who threw away a good marriage for a man who was already looking for my replacement, and I'm definitely not the one who's going to have to explain this to my family and friends for the rest of my life. Miranda looked around the room, taking in the shocked faces, the whispered conversations, the phones recording every moment of her breakdown. The reality of what had just happened was starting to sink in. You've ruined me, she whispered. No, Miranda. You ruined yourself. I just made sure everyone got to see it. She turned and ran from the room, Oscar close behind her, both of them fleeing the wreckage of their reputations and their relationship. The crowd began to disperse, buzzing with excitement over what they'd just witnessed. Emma appeared at my side, slipping her arm through mine. That was incredible, she said. Brutal, but incredible. It was justice, I replied. Long overdue, but justice nonetheless. What happens now? I looked around the empty room, at the evidence of Miranda and Oscar's public destruction, and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The war was over, and I'd won more completely than I'd ever imagined possible. Now, I said, we move on with our lives. Together, if you'll have me. Emma smiled, the kind of smile that made me forget all about revenge and betrayal and the bitter taste of a marriage gone wrong. I thought you'd never ask, she said. 3 years later, I was standing in the bathroom of the Fairmont Hotel, adjusting my tie and trying to calm my nerves. In 30 minutes, I'd be walking down the aisle to marry Emma Russo, the woman who'd helped me rebuild my life from the ashes of my first marriage, the woman who'd stood by me through the ugliness of revenge and the beauty of redemption. The bachelor party had been the night before, a low-key affair with a few close friends, including Darren, who'd provided commentary that was equal parts hilarious and inappropriate. Emma's bachelorette party had been similarly modest, just her sister and a couple of college friends who'd driven in from out of state. We'd kept the wedding small, intimate, focused on the people who actually mattered to us rather than trying to impress a crowd. After everything that had happened with Miranda and Oscar, both Emma and I had developed a healthy skepticism about grand gestures and public displays. The venue was perfect, a historic mansion with gardens that looked like something out of a fairy tale. Emma had chosen it, and like everything else about our relationship, it was thoughtful, genuine, and exactly right. I was checking my appearance one last time when Darren stuck his head into the bathroom. You ready for this, man? More than ready, I said, and meant it. How's Emma doing? She's beautiful, she's happy, and she's about to become Mrs. Grady. I'd say she's doing pretty well. I followed Darren out of the bathroom and toward the main hall where our guests were waiting. The ceremony was set to begin in 15 minutes, and I could hear the low murmur of conversation and laughter from the assembled crowd. That's when I saw her. Miranda was standing near the entrance to the garden, wearing a dress that was trying too hard to be elegant, and succeeding only in looking desperate. Her hair was different, shorter, with highlights that didn't quite work with her skin tone. She looked older, harder, like someone who'd been through a war and lost. She was talking to one of Emma's cousins, a sweet older woman who was probably being polite while secretly wondering who this uninvited guest was and how she'd gotten past security. What the hell is she doing here? Darren muttered. I have no idea, I said, but I wasn't going to let Miranda's presence ruin the best day of my life. Stay here. I'll handle this. I walked over to where Miranda was standing, my footsteps silent on the marble floor. She didn't see me coming until I was right beside her. Miranda, I said quietly, what are you doing here? She turned, and for a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition of how much I'd changed. I was in better shape than I'd been during our marriage. More confident, wearing a custom-tailored tuxedo that Emma had insisted on. I looked like a man who'd found his place in the world, which was exactly what I was. Elliot, she said, her voice carefully controlled. You look good. Thank you. you didn't answer my question. I came to see you get married, to wish you well. That's very thoughtful of you, but you weren't invited. I know, I wanted to see for myself, to see if you were really happy. There was something pathetic about the way she said it, like she was hoping the answer would be no, like she needed me to still be pining for her 3 years after our divorce. I'm very happy, I said simply, happier than I've ever been. With Emma. With Emma. Miranda's face tightened slightly. My best friend. Your former best friend, I corrected. She's been mine for the past 3 years. How long? Miranda asked, and there was something desperate in her voice. How long have you two been together? We started dating about 6 months after our divorce was finalized. We moved in together a year later. We got engaged 6 months ago. I paused, studying her face. Why do you ask? 6 months after the divorce, she repeated. So she was there for you right away, right when you needed someone. She was there for me when I needed her most, I agreed. She helped me remember who I was, what I was worth. She saw something in me that you never did. Miranda's composure cracked slightly. I made a mistake, Elliot. With Oscar, with everything. I threw away something good for something that turned out to be worthless. Yes, you did. Don't you think people deserve second chances? Don't you think love deserves a second chance? I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but a mild curiosity about what had brought her to my wedding day. The anger was gone, the hurt was gone, even the satisfaction of revenge had faded. She was just a woman I used to know, someone who'd been part of my story but was no longer part of my life. Some people deserve second chances, I said. Some love deserves a second chance, but not all people, and not all love. What about us? What about what we had? What we had was you settling for someone you considered beneath you while planning to trade up the moment something better came along. That's not love, Miranda. That's convenience. Her face went white. That's not fair. Isn't it? You called me ordinary, predictable. You said I had little jobs and little hobbies and little dreams. You threw away 12 years of marriage for a man who was already looking for your replacement before you'd even moved in together. And now you're here, at my wedding, to your former best friend, asking for a second chance. I was confused. I was going through something. You were selfish, I interrupted. You were cruel, and you were stupid. You had something real, something genuine, and you threw it away because you thought you deserved better. Well, congratulations, Miranda. You got exactly what you deserved. And what was that? Nothing. You got nothing. No career, no Oscar, no friends who trust you, no family who respects you. You got exactly what you gave me. Abandonment, betrayal, and the knowledge that the person you trusted most in the world thought you weren't good enough. Tears were starting to form in Miranda's eyes, but I felt no sympathy for her. She'd made her choices, and those choices had consequences. I'm sorry, she whispered, for everything. I'm so sorry. I know you are, but sorry doesn't undo the damage, Miranda. Sorry doesn't give me back the year I spent thinking I wasn't good enough for you. Sorry doesn't erase the humiliation or the pain or the nights I lay awake wondering what was wrong with me. Then what can I do? How can I make this right? You can't. That's the point. Some things can't be fixed. Some relationships can't be repaired. Some trust can't be rebuilt. You burned everything down, Miranda. There's nothing left to salvage. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks, looking nothing like the polished, confident woman who'd once ruled our social circle. Do you remember what we had? She asked, her voice breaking. Do you remember when we were happy? I considered the question seriously. Vaguely, it feels like a different lifetime. It was a different lifetime, she said. We were different people. No, I said quietly. I was a different person. You're exactly the same. Selfish, manipulative, willing to hurt anyone who gets in the way of what you want. The only difference is that now everyone can see it. Miranda looked around the garden, taking in the flowers, the guests, the evidence of the life I'd built without her. When she looked back at me, there was something like acceptance in her eyes. She makes you happy, she said. It wasn't a question. She makes me happy. She makes me laugh. She makes me feel like the best version of myself. She sees potential where you saw mediocrity, strength where you saw weakness, love where you saw settling. I see that now. I see what I lost. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're still trying to take something that doesn't belong to you. This is my wedding day, Miranda. This is supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and you're here trying to make it about you and your regrets. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. You're right. I shouldn't have come. No, you shouldn't have. But you did, and now you need to leave. Emma doesn't deserve to have her wedding day ruined by your presence, and I don't deserve to have my happiness overshadowed by your guilt." Miranda nodded, wiping at her eyes with a tissue that was already soaked with tears. "Will you tell Emma I'm sorry for everything?" "I'll tell her you were here. What I say beyond that depends on how gracefully you leave." She looked at me one more time, and I saw the exact moment when she finally understood that it was over. Not just our marriage, but any possibility of redemption or reconciliation or second chances. She'd lost me completely, irrevocably, and there was nothing she could do to change that. "Goodbye, Elliot," she said. "Goodbye, Miranda." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the marble floor, her shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. I watched her go, feeling nothing but relief that this final chapter of our story was finally closed. "Everything okay?" Emma's voice, soft and concerned, came from behind me. I turned to see my bride-to-be standing in the doorway, radiant in her wedding dress, her face glowing with happiness and love. She was everything Miranda had never been: genuine, loyal, kind, secure enough in herself to build others up instead of tearing them down. "Everything's perfect," I said, and meant it. "Have we met before?" Emma laughed, the sound bright and joyous in the afternoon air. "Possibly. You look familiar? Handsome man in a tuxedo, about to marry the luckiest woman in Chicago." "That's me," I said, offering her my arm. "Ready to make this official?" "I've been ready for 3 years," she said, taking my arm and smiling up at me with eyes that held nothing but love and promise and the future we were about to build together. As we walked toward the altar, I caught a glimpse of Miranda through the window, getting into a taxi that would take her back to whatever life she'd managed to cobble together from the ruins of her choices. I felt a moment of something that might have been pity, but it passed quickly. She'd had her chance at happiness, and she'd thrown it away. Now it was my turn, and I wasn't going to waste a single moment of it looking backward. The ceremony was perfect, intimate, heartfelt, filled with laughter and tears of joy. When the minister pronounced us husband and wife, Emma and I kissed like we were sealing a promise that would last forever. And as our friends and family cheered, as the photographer captured the moment, as the sun set over the garden in a blaze of gold and crimson, I knew with absolute certainty that I'd won more than just revenge against the people who'd wronged me. I'd won the chance to love and be loved by someone who saw me clearly and chose me anyway. I'd won the opportunity to build a life based on honesty and trust and mutual respect. I'd won the future I'd always deserved but had never dared to hope for. Miranda had asked if I remembered what we'd had, and I'd told her it felt like a different lifetime. But standing there with Emma, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about our happiness, I realized something important. I didn't want to remember what Miranda and I had had. That relationship, that version of myself, that small and diminished life, all of it belonged to the past. The future belonged to Emma and me, and it was going to be extraordinary.